Jake had never known. For 20 years, he had no idea what happened after he rescued Rose from that night's fire. He didn't even know if the elderly woman had survived. But the young woman who came to his door would reveal not only that Rose had lived, but also what legacy Jake's selfless act had created. And this legacy was bigger than Jake could ever have imagined. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on October 15, 1999. Engine Company 12 was already exhausted from a day of back-to-back emergencies. But when the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio announcing a structure fire at 1247 Maple Avenue with possible entrapment, every trace of fatigue disappeared. Jake Miller, 28 years old and 3 years into his career with the Chicago Fire Department, was riding shotgun as his crew raced through the night. The autumn air was crisp, and Halloween decorations still adorned many of the houses they passed, a stark contrast to the emergency they were rushing toward. As they rounded the corner onto Maple Avenue, the orange glow was visible from 2 blocks away. By the time they arrived on scene, flames were shooting from the second-floor windows of a narrow Victorian house, and neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, some still in their pajamas. Captain Rodriguez was already coordinating with the first engine company that had arrived minutes before them. "We've got confirmation of an elderly woman trapped on the second floor, rear bedroom," he shouted over the noise of diesel engines and water pumps. "Jake, Martinez, you're going in. Thomas, get that ladder to the window." Jake pulled on his breathing apparatus and grabbed his Halligan bar. At 6 feet 2 inches and 185 pounds, he was one of the more agile firefighters on the crew, often chosen for search and rescue operations in tight spaces. But as he and Martinez approached the front door, the intensity of the heat and smoke told him this was going to be one of the more challenging rescues he'd attempted. The interior of the house was a maze of smoke and heat. Jake's helmet light cut through the darkness as he and Martinez crawled along the floor, following the wall toward the staircase. The wooden stairs creaked ominously under their weight, and Jake could feel the structure of the house beginning to compromise. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before this place comes down," Martinez shouted through his mask. They found the bedroom at the end of a narrow hallway. Jake kicked in the door and immediately saw her, an elderly woman, probably in her 80s, unconscious on the floor beside her bed. She was small and frail, wearing a floral nightgown, and for a terrifying moment, Jake thought they were too late. But as he knelt beside her, he felt a weak pulse. Rose was alive. Jake scooped her up in his arms, amazed at how light she felt, and began the treacherous journey back through the house. The smoke was thicker now, visibility was near zero, and the heat was becoming unbearable even through his protective gear. Halfway down the stairs, Jake heard a deep groaning sound from above. The second floor was about to collapse. "Move, move, move!" Martinez screamed from behind him. Jake ran the last 10 steps and burst through the front door just as a section of the roof crashed into the second floor. He carried Rose directly to the waiting ambulance, where paramedics immediately began working on her. "Is she going to make it?" Jake asked as he stripped off his breathing apparatus. "Smoke inhalation, but she's breathing," the paramedic replied. "You got her out just in time." Jake watched as the ambulance pulled away, its red lights disappearing into the night. He turned back to help his crew finish extinguishing the fire, and within a few hours, they were back at the station, writing reports and cleaning equipment. It was just another night on the job. Jake filled out his incident report, noting that one elderly female victim had been rescued and transported to Chicago General Hospital in stable condition. He never learned her name was Rose Patterson. He never followed up to see if she survived. In 3 years of firefighting, he had learned that sometimes it was better not to know the outcome. The job required him to save who he could and move on to the next emergency. Over the next 20 years, Jake Miller built a distinguished career with the Chicago Fire Department. He was promoted to lieutenant in 2005, captain in 2012, and had earned commendations for bravery on multiple occasions. He married his college girlfriend Sarah in 2003, and they had 2 children, Emily, now 15, and Michael, 12. Jake often told people that being a firefighter wasn't about being a hero. It was about being prepared following training and working as part of a team. He had rescued dozens of people over his career, and while each rescue was significant to the families involved, Jake rarely dwelt on individual cases. There were simply too many emergencies, too many people in need, to maintain emotional connections to every rescue. The fire at 1247 Maple Avenue was no different. Jake remembered it as a challenging rescue, a close call that could have gone wrong, but he had no idea what became of the woman he carried from that burning house. In fact, if asked, he might not have even remembered that it was an elderly woman at all. Over 2 decades, the details of individual rescues tended to blur together. By October 2019, Jake was 48 years old and beginning to think about retirement. His knees ached from years of climbing ladders and running upstairs in heavy gear. His hearing had been damaged by decades of sirens and diesel engines. His family encouraged him to consider transitioning to a desk job or taking early retirement while he was still healthy enough to enjoy it. It was a Tuesday afternoon and Jake was at home working in his garden when the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Sarah was at work, the kids were at school, and the mail had already been delivered. When Jake opened the door, he found a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, standing on his porch. She was professionally dressed, carrying a small purse, and had an expression that seemed to contain both nervousness and excitement. "Are you Jake Miller?" she asked. "Yes, that's me," Jake replied, puzzled. "Can I help you?" "My name is Catherine Patterson," the woman said, her voice beginning to shake with emotion. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." Jake studied her face, trying to place the name or determine if he knew her from somewhere. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Catherine smiled and tears began to form in her eyes. "Not directly, but you saved my grandmother's life 20 years ago. Her name was Rose Patterson, and you rescued her from a house fire on October 15, 1999. Jake felt a jolt of recognition. The Maple Avenue fire. The elderly woman. The last-second rescue before the roof collapsed. "Rose," Jake said quietly. How is she?" "She passed away 6 months ago," Catherine replied. "She was 105 years old. But Captain Miller, she lived for 20 more years because of you. And in those 20 years, she changed so many lives. I came here because I needed you to know what your actions made possible." Jake stood in his doorway, stunned. He invited Catherine inside, and as they sat in his living room, she began to tell him a story that would change how he understood the impact of that single night 2 decades ago. "After you rescued her from the fire," Catherine began, "Grandma Rose spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors told us she was lucky to be alive. Her age and the smoke inhalation should have been fatal, but she was a fighter." Catherine pulled out a photo album from her purse. "This is what I wanted to show you." The first photo showed Rose in a hospital bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, but a determined look in her eyes. She told everyone who would listen about the brave firefighter who carried her to safety. She said an angel had saved her life. Jake looked at the photo, trying to reconcile his memory of the unconscious woman he had carried with this alert, spirited person in the hospital bed. "When she was released from the hospital," Catherine continued, "Grandma Rose's house was completely destroyed. She had lost everything: photos, furniture, all her possessions. She was 85 years old and homeless. Most people her age would have moved into assisted living and lived quietly, but not Grandma Rose." Catherine turned the page to show a photo of Rose standing in front of a small apartment building. She used her insurance money to rent a small apartment, and then she did something that surprised everyone. She started volunteering at the hospital where she had been treated. "Volunteering?" Jake asked. "At 85? 3 days a week," Catherine nodded. She said that being so close to death had taught her that every day was a gift, and she wanted to spend her remaining time helping others. She started in the children's ward, reading to kids who were undergoing long-term treatment. Catherine showed Jake photo after photo. Rose reading to children with cancer, Rose helping elderly patients with their meals, Rose organizing craft projects for pediatric patients. "But that was just the beginning," Catherine said. "After a year of volunteering, Grandma Rose met a little girl named Maria who was being treated for leukemia. Maria's family was from Guatemala, and they spoke very little English. The language barrier was making the treatment process even more difficult for them. Catherine's voice grew more animated as she continued the story. Grandma Rose was determined to help. At 86 years old, she enrolled in Spanish classes at the community college. It took her 2 years, but she became fluent enough to serve as a translator for Spanish-speaking families at the hospital. Jake shook his head in amazement. She learned Spanish at 86? She always said that you had given her a second life, and she wasn't going to waste a single day of it, Catherine replied. The hospital eventually hired her as their first volunteer translator. She helped hundreds of families communicate with doctors and nurses over the next 15 years. Catherine turned to another section of the photo album. Jake saw pictures of Rose at graduation ceremonies, award presentations, and community events. In 2010, when she was 96, the city of Chicago gave her the Outstanding Senior Citizen Award for her volunteer work. In 2015, the hospital named their volunteer program the Rose Patterson Program in her honor. She was still volunteering 3 days a week when she turned 100. Jake was speechless. The woman he had rescued had not only survived but had used her second chance at life to help countless others. "Captain Miller," Catherine said, leaning forward, "there's something else you need to know. My grandmother never forgot what you did for her, and she never stopped talking about it. She used your story, the story of the firefighter who risked his life to save a stranger, to inspire everyone she met." Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. These are some of the letters Grandma Rose received from people whose lives she touched over the past 20 years. But Captain Miller, she always told them that none of it would have been possible without you. Jake opened the folder and began reading. "Dear Mrs. Patterson, you probably don't remember me, but you helped translate when my son Carlos was being treated for his broken leg last year. Because of your help, we understood what the doctors were saying, and Carlos got the treatment he needed. You saved us from feeling helpless and scared. Thank you for being our angel, Maria Gonzalez." Another letter read, "Mrs. Rose, you read to my daughter Emma every day during her chemotherapy treatments. Your stories helped her forget about the pain and believe that she would get better. Emma is now cancer-free and in college studying to become a teacher. She says she wants to help children the way you helped her, Jennifer Walsh." And another, "Rose, your Spanish classes inspired me to go back to school at age 60 to become a nurse. I just graduated and got a job at the hospital where you volunteer. I hope to help people the way you've helped our entire community. Patricia Rodriguez." Jake looked up at Catherine, who was watching his reaction carefully. "There are over 100 letters like this," she said. "Every person Grandma Rose helped knew about you. She would always tell them about the firefighter who saved her life and gave her the chance to help others." Catherine pulled out another folder. These are the people who were directly inspired by Grandma Rose's story to become volunteers, teachers, nurses, or social workers. We count 47 people who changed their career paths because of her influence. Jake stared at the list of names and professions. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, social workers, hospital volunteers, literacy tutors. And then, Catherine continued, there are the people who were helped by those 47 people. The children taught by teachers who were inspired by Grandma Rose. The patients cared for by nurses who wanted to follow her example. We estimate that your rescue of my grandmother created a chain reaction that has positively affected over 3,000 lives. Jake felt overwhelmed. I just did my job, he said quietly. No, Catherine replied firmly. You did more than that. You risked your life to save someone who society might have considered less valuable because of her age. You treated an 85-year-old woman as someone worth saving, worth risking your own life for. And that single decision created 20 years of compassion and service that spread throughout our entire community. Catherine reached into her purse one more time and pulled out a small, wrapped box. Grandma Rose left specific instructions that this should be given to you if we ever found you. Jake unwrapped the box with trembling hands. Inside was a simple gold medallion on a chain. Engraved on one side were the words, "To Jake, my guardian angel," and on the other side, October 15, 1999, the day my second life began. Underneath the medallion was a letter in Rose's handwriting. Dear Captain Miller, if you are reading this, it means Catherine found you, and I am no longer here to thank you in person. I have spent 20 years hoping to meet you again, so I could tell you what your brave actions meant to me. You didn't just save my life that night, you gave me the opportunity to discover what I was truly meant to do with the years I had left. Every person I was able to help, every family I was able to comfort, every child I was able to teach, none of it would have happened without your courage. I often wondered if you had children, and whether they knew what a hero their father was. I hoped that someday I would be able to tell them myself. Please know that not a day went by in the past 20 years that I didn't thank God for sending me an angel in a firefighter's uniform. You showed me that even at 85, life could still hold purpose and meaning. I hope this medallion will remind you that the work you do matters more than you can possibly know. Every life you save has the potential to change the world. With infinite gratitude and love, Rose Patterson. Jake was crying now, the medallion clutched in his hands. She really lived to be 105? She died peacefully in her sleep, Catherine said, tears streaming down her own face. Right up until the end, she was planning new volunteer projects. She used to joke that she had to stay alive because she had too much work left to do. Catherine wiped her eyes and smiled. Captain Miller, there's one more thing. I'm getting married next month, and I wanted to ask if you would consider walking me down the aisle. Jake looked up in surprise. What about your father? My parents died in a car accident when I was 5, Catherine explained. Grandma Rose raised me. She always told me that you were the reason I had a grandmother to raise me, the reason I got to experience 20 years of love and guidance that wouldn't have been possible without you. Catherine's voice broke as she continued. She used to say that you were family, even though we'd never met. She said that anyone who loved her enough to risk their life for her was family. I've always thought of you as my honorary grandfather. Jake was speechless. This young woman, whose life had been shaped by the grandmother he had rescued, was asking him to play the role of father at her wedding. I would be honored, Jake said finally. 3 weeks later, Jake Miller stood at the altar of St. Mary's Cathedral, wearing his dress uniform and waiting to walk Catherine Patterson down the aisle. In the pews sat hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Rose Patterson's 2 decades of service, former patients, fellow volunteers, hospital staff, and community members. Before the ceremony began, Catherine introduced Jake to some of the people Rose had helped over the years. He met Maria, the little girl with leukemia who had inspired Rose to learn Spanish, now 25, and a pediatric nurse at the same hospital where Rose had volunteered. He met Carlos, whose broken leg Rose had helped treat, now a social worker specializing in helping immigrant families navigate the healthcare system. Mrs. Rose told us about you, Maria said to Jake. She said you were the reason she was able to help all of us. Every time she saved a life or helped a family, she would say, "This is for Jake, the firefighter who gave me the chance to be here." During the ceremony, the pastor spoke about Rose's legacy and the chain of kindness that had started with one firefighter's act of courage. Today, he said, we celebrate not just the union of Catherine and David, but the continuation of a legacy of service that began 20 years ago when someone chose to value a life that others might have given up on. As Jake walked Catherine down the aisle, he thought about all the lives that had been touched because he had run into that burning building on October 15, 1999. The children who had been comforted by Rose's stories, the families who had been helped by her translations, the volunteers who had been inspired by her example to serve others. After the ceremony, Catherine pulled Jake aside. "I have one more surprise for you," she said. She handed him an envelope containing a thick stack of papers. "What is this?" Jake asked. "It's the charter for the Jake Miller Foundation for Emergency Response Heroes," Catherine replied. Grandma Rose left money in her will to establish a foundation that provides college scholarships for the children of first responders who are injured or killed in the line of duty. Jake stared at the papers in disbelief. "She named it after me?" "She wanted to make sure that your name was remembered alongside hers," Catherine explained. "She always said that heroes should be honored, not forgotten." The foundation would provide scholarships for dozens of children over the coming years, ensuring that families who sacrificed for their communities would not have to struggle to provide their children with education opportunities. A year after the wedding, Jake received a call from Catherine. "I have news," she said, excitement clear in her voice. "David and I are expecting a baby." "Congratulations," Jake replied. "Rose would be so happy." "That's why I'm calling," Catherine said. "If it's a girl, we're naming her Rose. But if it's a boy, we'd like to name him Jake after you. Would that be okay?" Jake was moved beyond words. "I would be honored." 6 months later, Jake Miller held baby Jake Patterson in his arms at the hospital, the same hospital where Rose had volunteered for 15 years. As he looked down at the sleeping infant, he thought about the incredible journey that had led to this moment. The baby was the great-grandson of a woman Jake had rescued 20 years ago. He was the son of a woman who considered Jake family because of that rescue. And he was the newest link in a chain of love and service that stretched back to a single decision Jake had made in a burning building 2 decades earlier. Catherine had asked Jake to be the baby's godfather, another honor that connected him permanently to the family that had grown from his act of heroism. As Jake held baby Jake, he thought about all the children this little boy might one day help, inspired by the stories he would grow up hearing about his great-grandmother Rose and the firefighter who saved her life. Today, Jake Miller is 53 years old and recently retired from the Chicago Fire Department. He serves on the board of the Jake Miller Foundation, which has provided over $500,000 in scholarships to children of fallen and injured first responders. He attends the annual Rose Patterson Memorial Volunteer Recognition Ceremony at Chicago General Hospital, where new volunteers are inducted into the program Rose started. Each new volunteer receives a small medallion with Rose's picture and the inscription, "Every life saved has the power to change the world." Jake often speaks at fire departments and emergency response training programs, not about firefighting techniques, but about the ripple effects of their work. He tells them about Rose Patterson and the 3,000 lives that were changed because he chose to risk his own life for an 85-year-old stranger. "We don't get to know the full impact of our actions," Jake tells young firefighters. "We rescue someone and move on to the next call, but every life you save has unlimited potential. Every person you help might go on to help thousands of others." Catherine, now a mother of 2, Jake and Rose, has followed in her grandmother's footsteps by becoming a volunteer translator at the hospital. She brings her children with her sometimes, and they help distribute books and toys to young patients. Little Jake, now 4 years old, already talks about wanting to be a firefighter when he grows up, just like Grandpa Jake. Rose, 2 years old, loves hearing stories about her great-grandmother. The Maple Avenue fire of October 15, 1999, lasted 3 hours and destroyed 1 house. But the rescue that took place that night created a legacy of service that continues to grow 25 years later. On every October 15th, Jake visits Rose's grave. He brings fresh flowers and updates her on the Foundation's progress, Catherine's family, and the continued impact of her work at the hospital. This year, Catherine and her children joined him for the visit. As they stood around Rose's headstone, little Jake asked, "Grandpa Jake, why did you save great-great-grandma Rose?" Jake knelt down to the 4-year-old's eye level. "Because that's what we do," he said simply. "We help people who need help." "And then what happened?" little Jake asked. "Then she helped lots and lots of other people," Jake replied. "And someday you might help people too." Little Jake nodded seriously. "I'm going to be a firefighter and help people like you did." As they walked away from the cemetery, Jake thought about the question he's often asked at speaking engagements. Do you ever regret risking your life for someone so old? The question always amazes him, looking at Catherine and her children, thinking about the thousands of lives that Rose touched, considering the foundation that bears his name and helps families across the country. Regret is the last thing he feels. Jake Miller rescued an 85-year-old woman from a burning building because it was his job and because every life has value. He had no way of knowing that this single act would create a legacy that would outlive them both. But that's the point Jake has learned. We don't perform acts of courage and kindness because we can see their full impact. We perform them because they're right, because every life matters, because every person saved has unlimited potential to make the world better. Rose Patterson lived 20 more years after Jake Miller saved her life. In those 20 years, she proved that it's never too late to discover your purpose, never too late to make a difference, never too late to change the world. Jake Miller's story reminds us that heroism isn't just about the moment of rescue. It's about the chain reaction of kindness and service that can follow a single act of courage. When we choose to help others, especially when that help requires sacrifice or risk, we never know what we might be setting in motion. Rose Patterson's 20-year second life became a masterclass in purpose and service. At an age when many people withdraw from the world, she chose to engage more deeply, to learn new skills, to serve others, and to build a legacy of compassion that continues today. Together, Jake and Rose's story shows us that every life has value, that every act of heroism matters, and that the full impact of our actions often extends far beyond what we can see in the moment. The medallion that Rose left for Jake contained an inscription that has become the motto of the foundation named in his honor. Every life saved has the power to change the world. Jake Miller saved one life on October 15, 1999. That life went on to save thousands of others. That's not just a story about firefighting. That's a story about the incredible potential that exists in every act of love, courage, and service. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Inspiring Life Stories. Remember, you never know which life you save today might go on to change the world tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and never forget, every life has unlimited potential to make a difference.